Hello!
everyone. We're finally back with another What We Read. It's been a while.
Little bit.
So we're gonna section up this video again like I did the last time. And I'm gonna start. The first section that I'm gonna talk about is science fiction slash contemporary slash nonfiction. Because I figured that there were too few titles to separate all those things, so I might as well put them together. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the two contemporary titles. They're both new adult reads. First we have Beginner's Guide, Love and Other Chemical Reactions by Six de los Reyes. That's an ebook that I have, and it's one that's been recommended to me a lot over the years. It's a Filipino author, which yay, and it's about a STEM heroine, yay also. Basically means she's involved with science and technology.
Oh, okay, because I'm like STEM heroine. I'm like, what kind of, do they steal that on the streets? Is that a new strain or just...
So it's the story of a girl who is a scientist who decides to test out she decides to conduct a thing called the boyfriend experiment.
STEM.
And let's just say that it's also set in the context of Filipino society, which I thought was very interesting. Like there are things that happen in Tagaytay, which was really fun, and they sort of reference like cafes, which is a thing in the Philippines. Like you go to the cafe to which is also a thing here too, but like it's a big deal over there. Anyway, so this main character is determined to see if really it's something that she can experiment on and get good results on, and then to prove one way or the other whether or not she's, I guess, date worthy, girlfriend worthy. Or if that's just something that's not in the cards for her. And it starts out that way, but then things get complicated when people start getting involved, specifically a very, very cute acquaintance that she meets at one of these so-called cafes. I know I'm not describing it very well, but that's because it was a while since I read it. And the thing is, I liked it. It was cute. It's basically a romantic comedy with Filipino elements to it, which obviously made me feel very happy. And I still feel very warm and fuzzy when I think about it. As for like memorability, I'd rate that maybe more on like the middling scale. It's not one of those, it's not like the Kiss Quotient, for instance, where I'm like, I still think about that book and I can remember most things. But I wouldn't necessarily say it wasn't one that I also loved and have swoony feelings over. Anyway, it was a fun read, so you guys should check it out if you're interested. The other one that I wanted to mention is a book called Good Girl by Lauren Leigh. Check this out, guys. It's like fanfic, I swear to you. So the main character, the heroine, is named Jenny, and she is a singer. She's a singer-songwriter, and she's sort of country, but then she turns into sort of like a pop artist. Does this sound familiar to you? It should. Anyway, she gets caught up in a scandal, and so to like de-escalate the scandal and to get out of the public eye, she retreats to like an out-of-the-way place in Louisiana, I want to say, where she meets this hot dude who's the caretaker of the house, but really he actually owns the house. It's this whole thing. Anyway, obviously they hate each other on sight, but that hate develops into something else, and shenanigans ensue like any good romance, and it's really fun.
Were there getaway cars?
Actually.
I was a guess. I have no idea what the hell she's talking about.
Anyway, again, really fun read, great banter, great setup. I think it was a little too fast.
Did she know he was trouble when he walked in?
Actually, yes. You could kind of tell. Yeah, it was just a lot of fun to read. It was very quick too. Like I was literally 70% into it before I realized I was 70% into it. So if you're looking for something that's fun, fast-paced, very quick, definitely check that out. Lauren Leigh really has a knack for writing fun romances. And if you're looking for something fluffy, great one to check out. The next book is The Other Side of Lost by Jessie Kirby. This contemporary story is about a girl who lives the Instagram life. Like she actually is an Instagrammer and has an account and, you know, does all the posts and everything.
I thought it just like posts like fake stuff, but alright.
Yeah, well, she feels inauthentic, and so one day when she's really like emotionally hurting, I guess, or like she's really going through a rough time, she actually ends up posting this video where she like lets all her walls down and talks about how, you know, she feels inauthentic and whatever about it. Which is actually something that happened in real life. I'm pretty sure there was an Instagrammer who did something similar. Anyway, her cousin has just passed away, and they had made a promise to each other that on their 18th birthdays they were gonna hike the Appalachian Trail together. They had drifted apart over the years, and this girl hadn't really thought about doing it, but when her aunt sends her all the gear and the stuff that her cousin put together for the hike, she ends up on a whim deciding she's gonna hike the Appalachian Trail, and this is her story. It's so good. I was so surprised by how much I felt for this main character and what she was going through. I really like how Jessie Kirby talked about her journey, particularly the hiking parts and what happens during them. It almost made me want to hike, and I don't really like hiking, so that's definitely something remarkable. It was just so good, you guys. You should definitely check that one out if you want a new contemporary story like to really sink your teeth into. The non-fiction I wanted to talk about is My Family Divided by Diane Guerrero with Erica Moroz. This is the, I guess, YA version of her actual adult memoir. Diane Guerrero, she's actually an actress who is on Orange is the New Black and Jane the Virgin. It's basically the story of what happened to her after her parents were deported when she was a teenager. It is heart-wrenching to read this story because the honesty with which it's told, there's like you see what happens to her and her family and the effects of the separation and the difficulty they had to go through. And immigration is a big issue these days. A lot of us,
yeah, it's a timely
a lot of us, you know, understand it. We have people going through it or know of people going through it, and our hearts go out to them. Of course, it was hard to read considering the landscape we're currently in, but it's also eye-opening in a way that I think a lot of people will either relate to or be able to understand better. And yeah, it was good. Like, I solidly definitely recommend checking this out, or the adult version if you're into that. As for science fiction, the book I read is called The Loneliest Girl in the Universe. It's by Lauren James, and it is basically about this girl who is the only person manning this spaceship that is supposed to look for like an Earth 2, I guess, in some other galaxy. It was really her parents. It was one of those things where like you pick random people to start the new like colony and on Earth 2. She technically wasn't part of the plan because her parents just had her on the spaceship. So yeah, that caused complications, especially when, oh, I don't know, now they're gone and she's the only one on the spaceship. And she's been alone all her life until NASA tells her that they're sending another spaceship that can travel faster to join her and to, you know, update the technology and all of that. Let me just tell you, I didn't know what I was getting into except for that basic premise, so that's what I'm gonna leave you with. But it was a very interesting read, like just the things, the elements that she decided to include. She puts fan fiction in there, for goodness sake, which always a win. But honestly, I don't read a lot of sci-fi, so maybe it's just me, but I was very like interested in how she would play out the story of someone who's been alone on a spaceship and only knows the spaceship as her whole life.
Which is the very essence of sci-fi, mind you.
Yeah, and then to be faced with the prospect of actually meeting another person and trying to figure out how to navigate that, as well as all the other things that are going on in this story. It's actually a surprisingly quick page turner, I want to say. So if you're looking for a sci-fi that's a little more on like the action slash thoughtful side, it's weird because it's like a combination of like introspection and action. So
all good.
It's a good combination, mind you. I enjoyed it a lot. Would I reread it? Maybe not, because I know how it plays out now, but it was good when I read it for the first time, so definitely check it out if you're interested. Anyway, that is the end of section 1.
Alrighty, for me it's been a slow reading week.
I think month since the last
It's been a slow reading month for me, and you will understand why when we get back to my section. But the only book that I managed to read since the last video came out, novel-wise, would have to be the Dresden Files book 1. So I think it's called Stormbreaker. So we're flashing it on the screen thing. Yeah. Which I really, really like. Harry Dresden, wizard. That's exactly what it's. I've said.
I'm sorry. When you told me that the first time, I was like, wait, what? I thought he was a detective.
Yeah.
Forgot to go.
Okay. Right, so it's been a slow reading month for me, mostly, and you'll find out in a bit when we get back to kind of my section, but the only novel that I managed to finish was the first book of the Dresden Files. So Harry Dresden, wizard, yes, that's what it says on the placard outside his office. Kind of like Jessica Jones' Alias Investigations. This is Harry Dresden, wizard.
Yeah, I thought he was a detective, so I had no idea he was a wizard.
And yeah, as I said kind of in an earlier video, he does do detective-y things, only as a wizard. He's got, which, you know, gumshoes are on retainer with the cops because they can get to places the cops don't. They know people.
So
yeah.
he does PI.
So he's not just PI work, I would like to say, because he's not out there as a private investigator. He's out there as a wizard and everything that it has to do.
So he also does wizardy things.
He does totally good wizardy things. The lore is great. I understand why everybody kind of loves the Dresden Files now. It's definitely adult, kind of noirish fantasy, urban fantasy.
Okay.
And pretty exciting. I do want to read the rest of it. I understand.
That's always a good sign.
So, so yeah, it's very fast-paced. It's told in first-person, you know, POV. So that's always fun when you're tagging along with a gumshoe who just happens to be one of the master of the arcane arts. And so,
I love when you call it arcane arts.
I don't even know if that's a thing, but I call it that now. So I highly recommend it for anybody who wants some gritty, I would like to say, I guess now, classic urban fantasy, the same way like...
Is it? How old is it?
Well, you don't kind of know how for kids today, like boy bands are classic now.
No. Really?
Like, yeah,
No, I mean not the boy bands part.
They're like radio stations that say the classics, and it's all like 90s songs, and I'm just like, I was in high school with these. Right, so I would say that would be that. Any recommendations for classic urban fantasy outside of Dresden? I'm happy to jump in and wade into that pool. We do take some of the suggestions that you do put on.
Mackie's really good at that.
I do.
Meanwhile, stuck with the long TBR.
Well, you run the blog and stuff, so she has a duty to do.
Duty.
Yes. I don't know how you pronounce it that way, but all right.
All right.
Rolling right on.
My next section is going to be focused on graphic novels and manga, or should I say graphic novel and manga. The only graphic novel that I want to mention is Ive Grown Cold by Katie O'Neill. I've talked about this in our favorites video, I want to say. It's the story of this little girl and her dad who go back to their hometown to help with the cleanup after the storm that occurs. This town is located on the seaside, so you can imagine the sort of damage a typhoon or a big storm would cause. While they're there, you uncover bits and pieces of the little girl's history and also her family's history, and then another storm strikes and things kind of escalate, and they have to figure out what can be done in order to help the town, to help the people, and to help the inhabitants of the sea. It is adorably illustrated because it's by the same illustrator and author who did the Tea Dragon Society. So cute, so adorable. This story made me cry because there's just such a good emotional undercurrent to it, and I cannot wait for this to be out in the world and for everyone else to read it. This is actually an early copy we got from Oni Press. Margot is amazing, works at Oni Press, recommended it, loved it, would highly recommend.
Plus, aquacorns.
I know, right? I wouldn't want an aquacorn.
Hey.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the manga. First, we're going to talk about... Let me just address this by saying, in hindsight, I really should have waited to have all three before I even read it, even knowing exactly how this story plays out, mind you. So I finally read Volume 1 and 2 of Your Name, the manga by Makoto Shinkai, and the art apparently is by Ranmaru Kotone. Look how pretty that is.
It's kind of not enough to just watch the movie.
I mean, honestly,
not if you're a book lover.
You guys know I love Your Name. I can't talk.
That's how much she loves it, ladies and gentlemen. Takes her breath away. And
you
her words.
guys know how much I love Your Name, or
and
Kimi
her
no
grammar.
Nawa. And basically, it is a science fiction story. It's about two individuals who swap places in their dreams until one day they stop swapping places, and Taki, I think that's what his name is, yes, Taki has to figure out what exactly is going on. And you know what it is? By the end of Volume 2, I was like, wait, what? I was like, and then I realized...
As though she didn't know.
As though I didn't know how this ends.
As though the special edition DVD/Blu-ray is not sitting on our shelf. As though
watching it more than once has not given me enough of a clue. But it's so much fun to experience it in manga form, because there's just... You have more time to leisurely observe details in every scene, because the artwork is very...
It does end terribly.
It ends so badly. Like, Volume 2 ends so badly, and I was like mentally screaming at myself for not owning Volume 3, which I fixed immediately, and you'll see that in a future video. And then, also by Makoto Shinkai, The Garden of Words. The art is by Midori Motohashi. This is the story of a teenage boy and a teacher who basically run into each other one rainy morning in a garden, and she spouts off a piece of poetry to him, and it kind of changes the way he thinks about certain things. His future, his life, all of that stuff. Only the story is about more than that, because it's bigger than just the two of them in the garden, obviously. And I didn't know where it was gonna go. I honestly had no clue. Yeah, like, I had a guess, but...
It's not creepy jailbait, like,
no,
kind of like forbidden. It's not like that at all. It's Makoto Shinkai's sadder than that.
I know, right?
This is the man that gave us Voices of a Distant Star and 5 centimeters per second, although that one was overtly shippy.
Yeah, this one is not so much shippy as it is just like two people like who make an impression on each other so much so that they
the trajectory of their lives change.
It's really good. I don't love it as much as Your Name, and I don't love it as much as 5 centimeters per second, which I actually think I like a little better.
Well,
haven't seen
it's friggin' sad.
read Voices of a Distant. They're all sad though.
Not as sad as Voices of a Distant Star though. For me,
I haven't seen that one yet, but it was again beautiful illustrations. The story is very compelling. It's a standalone, so it finishes in this one volume. Thank God.
Oh, it does. That's cool.
It better finish in this one volume because if I was wrong, then I would be sad. No, I think it finishes that way.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was really good. Would highly recommend, although fair warning, it is kind of sad. Kind of. I mean, it's really
pretty
sad.
Cool.
And then, again, in Alexa kicking herself for only having volume 1 of certain things, I finally read Paradise Kiss by Aizawa. This is a recommendation from Kristen over at Super Space Chick, and it's basically about this ordinary girl who doesn't really know what she wants for herself in the future, and she ends up being spotted by a couple of people who work who are students of fashion, and they need a model for their show, and they want her to be the model.
Are these students male?
Some of them are.
Okay.
They run a line or a house out of a house called Paradise Kiss, and it's basically how her life is turned upside down after meeting all these people. And can I just tell you, I didn't think I would love this one, and then I read it, and then I was so mad because it ends, and then I'm like, but I only have part 1. Again, for me having to remedy that immediately after reading it. It's so fun in a sort of like TV drama, soap opera type way, because
Which
a lot
is exactly
of the things,
what this technically
exactly. A lot of the things that go on in it are definitely like,
there's actually a live action.
over the top. Sorry.
Did you know?
I knew there was an anime, I didn't know there was a live action.
I think there was a live action one somewhere hereabouts. I'll have to
Thankfully, this one is actually finished, unlike the other series that Aizawa penned, which is not finished, and I still have a lot of feelings about that. But I would recommend this one if you're looking for manga to get into. It's very easy because it's contemporary setting, it's got a fun fashion aspect to it, and the characters are just like, they're over the top.
They pop out of the page.
Fun.
Yeah, they're cool.
So yeah, that is the end of section 2 for me.
Right. So reasons now in this segment of reasons why I didn't read anything, I actually did finish these 2 volumes right here. I am holding the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide, which I will also feature in the
book haul. So many things.
In the book
actually.
haul. Well, mostly I think the Dungeon Master's Guide, because I'm pretty sure I didn't have that when I started out. Anyway. And I have to say that these are amazing tools for anybody who wants to get into Dungeons & Dragons. We had just finished our first campaign with Super Space Chick and Silver Gallagher, i.e. Andrew and Kristen, e.g. i.e.
I don't know. They're our friends.
Andrew and Kristen, really and so I got some of the rules kind of weird, but I found a narrative way to justify it, and we will retcon
everything we
narratively as well and course correct. But I highly recommend these, not just for beginners, but also for kind of I guess veteran kind of players, because they're such great reference books.
I was gonna say
they're amazing reference materials. I love taking them with me everywhere I go. I don't even know why I said that. Okay, they're such great reference books. Starting with, of course, I know, right? Starting with the Player's Handbook, which basically tells you how to build your characters, how to multi-class, meaning how to have more than just the one job. What a noob.
Basically.
Yeah, you know.
It's really fun too, because it's
not a job either. It's just like a calling or whatever the heck you are. But it does tell you all of the rules. It's got like nifty, handy little things like charts and you know, guides and whatever. And so literally, you could spend the entire book just reading everything and just absorbing everything, especially if you want to run like a particular campaign. What surprised me a lot about the Dungeon Master's Guide, I know, right? It's just what surprised me a lot about the Dungeon Master's Guide is how in-depth people can actually, you know, create worlds through this. Like if you're kind of like, if you've heard of Paint by Numbers, this is world build by numbers, I think, because it'll really tell you, well, what kind of government would you like your world to have? Here are the governments, and it feels like a rich, like it feels like the Lego like
it's like
shop.
building blocks, right?
And you know, if anyone's ever been to like a Lego like shop recently, there's like 20 billion drawers of different Lego pieces each, and it pretty much feels something like that. It helps to you know, it helps to have an idea of what you want to build, and then find the materials that you want to build it with here. And so there's so many great there even talks about all of the realms and the dimensions and how to do the whole multi-world type deal, which is really, really cool. So I highly recommend these two as starters. They are so much, you can't get through them in just like a week and then know everything. This is really just telling you what the landscape is, and then you begin to explore, which is almost a metaphor for Dungeons & Dragons in itself anyway. And so I am a brand new DM for Dungeons & Dragons specifically. We all cut our teeth at that campaign last Sunday, I want to say. And we're
as of filming this.
Yeah, and we're gonna get ready to make another one because they have to know what happens next.
I know, right?
Cool.
And the last section, which is a section that you guys have heard me talk about more often than not, fantasy, of course. So the first book I'm going to talk about is a book called Sea Witch by Sarah Henning. It is basically the story of how Ursula becomes Ursula. Except that she's not named Ursula, but getting into that. The basis of the story is Evie is a witch, and it's something that she has to keep hidden because people would, you know, give her trouble for it. And everything changes for her when her best friend Anna drowns at sea. And that's all I'm gonna say really about it, but let's just say from there, the author does a really good job of taking elements from the original fairy tale from Hans Christian Andersen and spinning it into the story. Like, I really enjoyed what she did with it. There's also like sort of a couple of references that feel more Disney-ish, which is fun too. The thing I will say that kind of made it a little less likable for me is that the pacing is a little bit weird. You don't really get the chance to get to love these characters or really invest in them because there's just that little thing that could make you really, really feel for them and empathize with them that was missing for me. But overall, it was very enjoyable. I thought it was actually one of the better like Little Mermaid / Sea Witch inspired stories that I've read in a while, so definitely check that out if you're looking for more titles in that vein. The next thing I want to talk about is 1,000 Beginnings and Endings, which is a collection of short stories that were edited by Ellen O and Elsie Chapman. The thing about this collection is that every single story is inspired by something in Asian mythology. So you've got all sorts of Asian mythology: Indian, Korean, Japanese, Filipino even. And it's a fun little collection. Like, I don't know what I was expecting going into it, but I think I was expecting something, which is why I feel a little let down maybe. It had really fun takes on things and fun stories. Like, there were a couple I enjoyed. There's one where it's Korean mythology and it's interwoven with a video game, which I loved. There's Filipino mythology set in New York City, so obviously loved it. There's a Kitsune story, and I love that mythology too. I think for me, maybe it just felt like there was no cohesive thread, even though they're all mythologically inspired or lore inspired. That's one. Basically. I think, yeah, it was basically like I liked a lot of it. Didn't love a lot of it. I loved a few, not all of it. But it's a very solid collection all in all if you're looking for something that gives you a little bit of a taster with all of these authors that are involved in it, and also for the different mythologies that they included in the book. So, we're going to talk about the fact that I finally finished my reread of the first trilogy in the Grishaverse. And that means I read Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. These are the old hardcovers. Yes, I've had them for a long time. Siege and Storm is the second book, Ruin and Rising is the third book. I remembered a lot of this one, so for the most part I was just like enjoying myself because my favorite character in this entire series shows up in this book, does the thing that makes me fall in love with him, and I still love him for it. And in this one, I barely remembered anything, but like while I was reading it, I was getting very emotional because I was like, no! If you guys didn't know, the story revolves around a girl named Alina, who is the Sun Summoner, and that makes her extra special because she can beat back the darkness, which is a problem that this world has been experiencing, particularly with the rift that exists in the first book. After the events of that first book, when she is finally claimed and trained at the Little Palace, she now has to figure out where she stands, what she's willing to fight for, and it all happens in these books. It's so good. It's still just as good as the first time. I still think this one is my favorite. No, actually, I know this one is still my favorite. But this one is actually as good as, or even better than I remembered it being. So definitely check out this series. Cops in Maki's direction. I've been telling him to read it since the first book came out. I'm just gonna point that out.
That was like years ago, oh my god.
Yes. And the last book that I need to mention in this particular What We Read is also a favorite of this year, and that book is The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is my copy now, but I actually borrowed Kristen's copy to read before this one arrived. This is the second book in the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. The first book is The Cruel Prince, and as you guys know, I loved that book. It was about a girl named Jude who is mortal but living in the Fae world after being taken as a child, and she wants to find her place in that world. And so she schemes and fights and trains and somehow manages to carve out a name for herself in more ways than one. And this book is basically the consequences of every single choice and decision she has made at the end of the first book. So good. I did not think it could get any better, and then I read this book and I was like, well, shit. It's 2018, middle of 2018, the next book comes out in 2019, and that's this one. And then the third book, which I now have to wait for after reading this one, is 2020. Do you realize how long I have to wait for this book, you guys?
Quite a while.
Anyway, it was flippin' fantabulous. Definitely check it out, especially if you like your fairies on the side of scheming and cruel and twisty. So, yeah. Is
there any other side that they come as?
The nice, light, glittery kind?
Like Tinkerbell?
Yeah. Anyway, that is the end of this What We Read. If you guys have any more questions about any of the books we mentioned in this video, feel free to mention them in the comments. And if you've read any of them, I would love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, also feel free to tell us what you've been reading. We would love to know. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We will see you guys for another video soon.